We have right now unimaginable financial resources at our disposal. I believe we can fulfill once and for all, after 110 years of statehood, the destiny of New Mexico as a genuine homestead of the American dream, a place where people can grow and thrive and live in peace and prosperity, where people have the resources they need to support themselves and their families. What we do here now, what we do in the coming weeks, will set the stage. Dating back decades, a timid mindset has afflicted people in this Capitol building, a pessimism that can be self-fulfilling. Thinking small is a curse. Big and meaningful changes are possible, but the biggest change may be our attitude, our perspective. At a moment in time when we have the money to do it all, let's not limit ourselves. Let's not be unnecessarily incremental. Can't New Mexico be a state? Can't we be the state where anything is possible? So on that note, let's give every single educator in this state a 7% raise this year minimum. That would be the biggest pay bump in recent memory, and it would put us first in the region for average educator pay. They deserve it, and we can afford it, and it's the right thing to do. Let's also raise the starting salaries for every tier of educators, which means some teachers will see a 20% raise this year. And let me be clear, this kind of progress pays for itself. When we support educators, when we retain high-quality teachers and keep our schools brimming with talented professionals, our other strategic investments in New Mexico children and in public education are supported and sustained. Our graduation rates will continue to rise. Our literacy rates will continue to improve, especially with the targeted new phonics program that we have initiated and that the legislature must continue to support. We get more kids into high-quality apprenticeship programs and institutions of higher learning that would help them build fulfilling careers and lives. It all starts with demonstrating support and respect for our educators. Day one, I said we would do that, and we're getting it done. And we're going to keep going. Let's cut taxes for every single person in New Mexico. We haven't cut the sales tax in this state in 40 years. It's only gone up and up and up for decades, burdening New Mexico households and making it harder for our small businesses to be competitive. But under my tax cut proposal, New Mexicans would save more than $170 million every year. As my colleagues from across the aisle have pointed out in years past correctly, that money doesn't belong in government accounts. It belongs in the pockets of hardworking New Mexicans. I agree, and I expect the legislature to prioritize this relief. I feel the same way about the taxes that are taken out of Social Security benefits. New Mexico is only one of a few states that taxes Social Security. I'm calling today for that taxation to end. We must unburden the New Mexicans who rely on Social Security benefits by cutting their taxes. This is good government, serving the people who have asked us to serve them. New Mexicans deserve it, because I believe we have an obligation to find ways to make life easier for the people of New Mexico. And I will keep looking for ways to do exactly that. In the last year, we're 11th best for job growth in the country overall. In 3 years, we have created over 10,000 jobs in every corner of our state, and those jobs now have an average salary better than $90,000 a year. That's a record high, and it's a big, bright signal to other businesses, like the hundreds of businesses that have relocated here in the last 3 years, showing them how successful our public-private partnerships can be and how business-friendly New Mexico is. We're cutting red tape, and it is making a real difference for New Mexico business owners. Unlike in the aftermath of the Great Recession, we're not going to let the pandemic stall us and take away years of growth. We will not have lost another decade. In fact, despite the challenges of the last 2 years, we've hardly lost a step. The fact is, unemployment has gone down every month for 10 straight months. The number of unemployed New Mexicans dropped by 5% in November alone. We're expanding our economic footprint into every single community. Legal cannabis is going to create thousands of jobs and serious tax revenue for local governments to support local services in every corner of our state. Almost 40,000 more students receiving high-quality education for free under my Opportunity Scholarship Program means more skilled workers building 21st century careers right here in Roswell, Espanola, Sunland Park, Rio Rancho, Chama, and so many more. The intellectual infrastructure of a nationally competitive state economy is being built right here, right now, on campuses and in communities throughout our state. And clean hydrogen will support thousands of jobs, especially in rural New Mexico, while helping us sprint toward our net zero carbon deadlines and decarbonize the transportation sector.
There's quite a bit to touch on in that clip. We'll unpack it all in a moment, but let's welcome in our line opinion panelists virtually. First today, hello to Julianne Grimm, editor and publisher at the Santa Fe Reporter, Crystal Ciarza, owner and CEO at Ciarza Social Digital, and new to the show, a warm welcome to Adrian Hedden, reporter at the Carlsbad Current-Argus. Welcome to you all. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham clearly isn't shying away from spending. In fact, quite the opposite, saying the state has, quote, unimaginable resources and that thinking small is a curse. Before we get into the specifics, Crystal, why don't we start with you? Initial thoughts on the speech, and do you think the legislature will follow her call for a change in attitude when it comes to that spending?
The speech itself was very well done. There's definitely the key points and the personality of the governor that was on the presentation and the speech itself. I found it really fascinating that, the governor is actually one of those individuals that feeds very well off of the energy of people. And I felt like I couldn't have imagined how difficult this was to actually film rather than be in front of the legislators that she very much dearly cares about. I think the key point and the starting topic, which was education, she went right into it, and we saw that in the clip, 7% in terms of teacher raises, making it a competitive area to be a teacher for. This is something that we've all studied. This is not a new message in terms of giving teachers raises. In fact, it happened in the beginning of her administration. But now we're actually talking about a certain number and a certain threshold that would be workable. And we also talked about the fact that she's trying to eliminate gross receipts tax. I think that's really fascinating. But I think the key thing that I took away from all of the different pieces of the presentation off of the State of the State was that it's a really bipartisan message. And every governor goes through this, especially for reelection, is making sure that you have that bipartisan unity on the conversation. So that way you have a successful legislature. So,
Julianne, let me follow up with you on that. Did this strike you more as a State of the State or a re-election speech? Oh, you're muted, Julianne.
I'm so sorry about that.
That's okay.
I think the State of the State is often like the pep talk, the quarterback giving the rally speech, heading into the big game. But I think we're going to talk about a clip later where the governor really tries to frame her agenda as not a conflict, not part of one particular team, but as this sort of, up the middle, we can all do this together kind of strategy. I think it was there was an effort made for it to be concise. When you get Governor Lujan Grisham off script a little bit, she has a tendency to ramble and sort of start ideas and finish different ideas within the same sentence. And so I think that structurally, this was really easy, simple language that was meant to appeal to folks who might not have been following every turn of the screw on all of these issues. So, broadly, that's what we saw. And again, relatively short compared to some previous states of the state. And yeah, when it comes to the specifics in this segment, I think that there's broad support for teacher raises. There's broad support for not taxing Social Security. And I don't know that there are going to be very many arguments about lowering the state gross receipts tax so that we'll be more competitive on the average. However, in places like Santa Fe and some other municipalities that have really ratcheted up their local option, you still are going to see a relatively high gross receipts tax rate, even with that state change.
Right. Adrian, again, welcome to the group. Want to get your thoughts, especially from your part of the state there in the southeast corner of the state. Did some of these things we're talking about in terms of reaching across the aisle and having a positive attitude about the state as we try to come out of this pandemic, do you think, how did that resonate with your quadrant of the state?
Well, I think that what she didn't say was pretty significant when it comes to climate change and environmental issues. Those are topics that draw a lot of criticism from an oil and gas region like ours when you're talking about greenhouse gas emission limits, clean fuel standards, shifting to electric cars, that kind of thing. I think that maybe she left that out to make it more appealing to Republicans. Like I said, she mentioned nothing about climate change, and these are signature issues that she's touted. I think throughout the administration, when you talk about the Energy Transition Act, trying to shift us away from a reliance economically on oil and gas, these are all things that she has argued for. But to hear no mention of that sort of lends it to what you guys have been saying, that it was trying to maybe reach across the aisle and leave some of those controversial topics out of the speech.
I wanted to add on to that. Adrian, you had a really good point that and also to think about is that she's only has a 30-day session. And one of the things that lobbyists are actually saying right now is that getting a message is actually really difficult for this administration this time around, especially for the 30-day. So I wouldn't even be surprised if she doesn't tackle those particular topics. Like, lobbyists are not sweating right now, which normally they do, even as the session started. I think everybody's kind of had there's not going to be much that's done unless it's the governor's agenda.
Yeah, maybe she'll be leaving the environmental topics for the next session. But there have been several bills that they've talked about and touted as main priorities. So it was interesting to not hear about that. That's what I was listening for.
Yeah.
Personally.
Crystal, a follow-up to that point you just made, though, doesn't that run contrary to what you said earlier about this bipartisan message? She does get to call the shots here, and she's got some things even that weren't really delved into deeply in the speech, the voting reform that we know are priorities for her. She still is driving this thing in many ways, right?
Absolutely. She is in leadership. She's obviously the executive branch of our government. So it doesn't seem quite contrary, though, because just because messages are a little bit, or in technical terms, in order to get a bill considered to the governor at any point in time, just for the sake of parliamentary procedure education, right? A message has to be sent to the governor to say that you would like to actually discuss and debate this topic during this 30-day session. And so, yes, so going back to it, doesn't, even though she's calling the shots, yes, but I think that, in terms of organizational management and leadership, we have to see what bills are actually going to be relevant, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's another thing that was really fascinating about this entire presentation. She did not mention the pandemic all the way up until the end of the presentation. She didn't even bring about the fact that National Guardsmen are potentially being asked to go into schools at this point. She tried to avoid the pandemic problems like the plague in this speech. It was very fascinating. Yeah, like the pandemic. Like it was fascinating. It was very calculated. It was a very calculated State of the State address.
And I think that shorter time frame allowed for some of that, and people kind of understood that, and it would be hard to carry a 45-minute speech by yourself without any interaction. Julianne, back on the financial outlook, I'm just curious your thoughts, because former Lieutenant Governor Diane Dennis, when she was on with us on Tuesday right after the speech, mentioned how this year's budget, over $8 billion, is almost twice what they were dealing with when she was on the fourth floor in the administration. But how much of that is real? Because we know that some of this is still pandemic relief. And how do you think that changes the approach to how we spend it?
I mean, there's always this tension, right? How much of today's money can you spend for tomorrow? How much of the budget of the recurring operating funds are we really going to be able to depend on in the future? And, I think we've got some really talented folk in our legislative, council committees. The LFC puts out these amazing reports where they're really tapping into all the analysis across the state. Like we heard from Adrian, the oil and gas sector is strong. There's a lot of money getting pumped into the state coffers, and we are seeing a lot of federal funding and expecting more federal funding. So I think you're going to hear this administration, and you're going to hear certainly the Democratic Party leaders talk about how things are flush. And then I think on the other side, if things predictably play out, you'll have the conservative faction saying, whoa, slow your roll. We can't just keep spending money like it grows on trees or it shoots out of the ground.
Right. Adrian, about a minute left, a little more than a minute here, but wanted to get your thought as an environmental reporter. One of the issues that seems like it might be a little more rocky than others is the governor's push towards the hydrogen fuel technology, which we also saw, even though she wasn't on the floor when she gave her speech, we still saw a bit of a protest and a demonstration and some things going on at the Capitol on Tuesday. What's your sort of outlook as more and more environmental groups seem to line up against this as the way to go, or just continuing one toe in fossil fuels and one toe in environmental issues?
Well, environmentalists seem to view hydrogen power, or at least as it exists today, as a fossil fuel. It requires natural gas to combust to create the energy, and that causes emissions and pollution, things like that. What's interesting about the governor, they recently announced, a memorandum of understanding with Los Alamos Sandia National Laboratory to actually try to develop source of hydrogen that would be lower carbon or zero carbon. And this seems like that would allay some of those concerns. But presently, I see reports that about 99% of U.S. hydrogen power does use natural gas, which is extracted, or water. It's a chemical reaction that separates the hydrogen from these elements. And, that would still require extraction, could still cause pollution, and could still even use hydraulic fracturing, to get to that. So, yeah, there's a lot of concerns from the environmental groups. I think what the governor is saying basically that they want to develop new technology for this power source that would be lower carbon intensity, but that remains to be seen. Yeah, and that's why they're concerned.
And you mentioned water, something else we didn't hear a lot about, but I think we'll get to that in a little bit. Got to leave that there for now. But one of the biggest items we knew would come up in the State of the State address is crime. Here's Governor Lujan Grisham on the changes and investments she says will help make New Mexico a safer place.